So, welcome to Fossil Education School Libraries. We hope to help you engage with inquiry in a way that maybe you hadn't thought about before, help you understand the content on the Fossil Group website, introduce you to people who are using Fossil in schools, and most of all, just have a conversation about the role of the school librarian within education. Thanks for joining me again, Daryl. It's been a while. I hope you're well. Are there any exciting updates that we need to know about before we crack on with this conversation?
Yeah, we've finally made it to the school holiday.
Yay!
Um, so yeah, term was very busy, and it was an unexpectedly busy but exciting end to the term for us because entered students from the Scholars Society into that Teen Tech Awards, which I
Yeah,
used to run as an activity at Oakham School very
yeah,
successfully. And really the reason why I got into Teen Tech in the first place was because I wanted to test the fossil inquiry process.
yeah.
And that provided a wonderful opportunity to do that. So we didn't get off to the smoothest start for various reasons to Teen Tech this year. But one of our teams did make it through to the final and then won
Wow, brilliant.
their category, which was absolutely great. But it was very complicated because we had a team of three.
Yeah,
Um, one of the members of the team, after they'd started, his family had to relocate to England.
okay.
So they were continuing via Teams. And then it was during our activity week at school. So one of the girls couldn't make the final because she was in France.
Oh no.
And then we had to get the one student to connect up with the other student from England, added layer of work to prepare for and then go through to the final. But yeah, it was absolutely great. And just a reminder of what a good opportunity that is to practice inquiry outside of the classroom.
Yeah. So do you think
Yeah.
you'll run it again?
Yes, so the intention is definitely to run it for the scholars again. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how it would work. But
Okay.
I had been thinking about the fact that some of what we do for the year nine signature work lends itself to what we did with the scholars for Teen Tech, and that there
Okay.
may be a possibility for some of the students doing the year nine signature work to develop that for Teen Tech. But that
Okay.
is actually, yeah, that is quite complicated, and I haven't yet had a chance to think through it, which is why I was very interested to see Janet's post
Yeah.
in the Fossil Group forum, thinking along the same lines for her literacy project.
Because actually what's really nice is if they've got themselves really involved and interested in their inquiry to actually then take it that step further. Because I'm also writing a book. Um, we were talking about the fact that you're nearly finished yours, but I was considering the fact that students have to get to a point where they have to finish the piece of work that they're doing. There's an ending because they have to submit an essay or they have to submit a poster or a presentation. But actually, the inquiry still leaves or should leave them questioning
Mm.
as to what's next. And actually, that links perfectly to then allow them to do something even more substantial, I suppose, than not that it's just writing an essay for school, but that's what it is. Whereas if you take a step to something like Teen Tech, it's that next step away from that and making it even more real for them, I think, isn't it?
So I think because there is there's such a sense of a real world outworking of their idea
Yeah.
in Teen Tech.
Yeah.
But practically, I haven't, because since term started, I had an unexpected trip to South Africa for personal reasons.
Yeah.
So I haven't had an opportunity since school started. I mean, since term ended, to think through practically how to align what we need to do, which I think will be the same challenge for Janet, is how to align what we need to do for the signature work and
Yeah.
English with what we need to do enter because there's an innovation log that you have to produce by a certain date as an entry for Teen Tech,
Right.
which then is separate to if you make it through to the final, the presentation that you need to put together for the final. So
Right.
practically, there's quite a bit of tricky stuff I think that I and she would need to work through.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had a chance to think about it yet, but it does give students a wonderful opportunity to extend that beyond what would be possible
Yeah.
in the confines, for example, of the signature work.
Yeah. And actually, what's really nice is the two of you are thinking along the same lines, so
Yeah,
can
I was very,
model it out
very,
together.
yeah, very surprised, pleasantly surprised to see her post.
Yeah.
So I just need to let her know that I had been thinking along those lines and will happily share
Yeah.
my thinking as it unfolds further. But yeah,
Yes.
not quite there yet.
Yes. You will. You will get there.
Yeah.
And anything else? Any other updates?
Well, yeah. So then there are two other things that are quite exciting. One is on Monday. We've got a colleague from Japan, Mickey, who's visiting us for a week to come and talk about what we're doing with FOSIL.
Okay.
And specifically what we're doing at Blancheland. Now, the interesting thing is that she visited for a week when we were still at Oakham School.
Ah, okay.
Uh,
He's been following you for a while then.
yeah, so that relationship stretches back a number of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're really looking forward to spending time with her and catching up with what she's doing in Japan. She's in Tokyo, sharing development since Oakham with her at Blancheland. So yeah, we're looking forward to picking up on that, and with the development of the Institute for the Advancement of Inquiry, I'm particularly keen to talk to her about that
Yeah.
because it may very well be that there are opportunities for collaboration with her and through her in Japan. So we'll see what that brings.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's quite interesting and quite exciting is I think you'll remember last year. I don't know when it was last year, but San Jose State University had that Leap into the Future of School
Yeah.
Libraries conference,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and that was online. And you presented at that,
Yeah.
and Jenny, Barbara, and I presented at that. And that was a fantastic opportunity, and that conference was a real success. I had an invitation from David Lurcher, who organized the first Leap into the Future conference, to do a keynote with Barbara at Leap into the Future 2.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But now, yeah, so that one is in person.
It is. Yeah. I got an email from David saying something about you. They're going to do a pre-conference thing, which I was invited to, but I'm not going to the conference,
No.
unfortunately, I can't be making that. But yeah, I knew the second one was coming.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that is that that's a pre-conference event to the AASL National Conference
Right.
in St. Louis in Missouri. So the pre-conference Leap into the Future 2 is on Wednesday, the 15th of October.
Yeah.
So the reason why that's exciting is that Barbara and I have an invitation to do a keynote focused on our book, which will be finished by then.
It will be finished by then.
Yes, because the deadline is the end of August.
Definitely be finished by then.
It will be finished by then. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we're just um, wrapping things up with the book, and it's been really interesting to work through the book from the beginning to the end. So I've
Yeah.
gained real insight into, a whole layer of insight into Barbara's development of her model,
Yeah.
as well as her current thinking and ideas for the future. So that I'm hoping I'll be able to make it because David is paying for me to go
Great.
um,
Does that fall in October half term, or is it time off
just
school?
before. So
Oh, it might be all right then.
I do still need to get permission for that.
Yeah,
Um, so if I get permission for that, then I'm very much looking forward to the pre-conference, but I am also then hoping to attend the opening of AASL
right. Well,
because I think it's very difficult for us to. I don't know if you've ever looked at an AASL conference program.
brief.
It is staggering,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
compared with either SLG or SLA
yeah,
conference. You cannot believe the scale and the scope. It is staggering.
yeah.
So that in itself would be an experience just to attend the opening,
Absolutely.
and the events on the opening day, which are on the Thursday. Yeah. So that's we'll watch this space.
Yeah, yeah. No, so it's good. So cracking on with the book is the essential thing to making all of this happen then.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I've got the book is essentially done. The bit that is still missing is the chapter that I'm responsible for on developments. So basically signature work inquiry in practice based on what we're doing at Blancheland. So in a certain sense, I know what I need to write.
Yeah,
Um, I just need to write it now,
yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
and then effectively we're done.
We're in the sort of same position with the book that we're writing. We've got two or three more chapters to write, but momentum has built again, which is good. So
Mm.
Claire and I can see the light at the end of the
Oh,
tunnel.
good.
We think, we think.
Good.
Right then, so we're going to head back to the FOSIL Symposium that we ran in February this year to discuss something that's been on my mind. David Harrow from AKS Lytham did a presentation about the use of inquiry and particularly fossil using fossil in his school. So there was not much talk about the use of the librarian, and it got me wondering, do schools really need a library and librarian to use fossil? Let's go. Over to you, Daryl. What are your
Yeah. So,
thoughts?
so this is a very interesting and I think complex question. I think in short, no,
Yeah,
the a school wouldn't necessarily, but that would depend on two things. Is one, the school would need to be committed to inquiry as a whole school approach to teaching and learning.
which
So,
is what's happening at AKS Lytham.
yes.
Is that
So,
yeah,
just for people who may not be aware, so David is the headmaster of AKS Lytham. He was he was academic deputy head at Oakham School, and he was my line manager. And he really became increasingly supportive of the work that we were doing, and particularly sharing that work through the fossil group.
yeah.
And
So
he
he had
took,
so he hasn't just randomly picked out inquiry and fossil. He learnt about it from you in the context of where he was working at that point.
well, so there are two things also to bear in mind there is because if you remember, so Oakham is a secondary school,
Yeah,
and they were, I think, a relatively early adopter in the UK of the IB diploma program.
right.
So they had been running the diploma program, if I remember correctly. I think it was either 2010. No, 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 no. It would have been, no, no. I think it may have been 2001.
Okay,
Uh,
brilliant. Okay.
they already had the IB diploma in place. And if you remember, my work on fossil started with trying to understand how to better support the extended essay process. And then before we left, and I think partly as a consequence of the work that we were doing on FOSIL to support inquiry, um, the school made the decision to adopt the 3-year MYP program, IB MYP program.
Right.
Now, both of those, so the IB continuum is an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning.
Yeah.
That ought to go beyond the personal project for the MYP and the extended essay in the DP. The whole program is really inquiry based.
And is that, sorry, is that what's happening at AKS Lytham? They're currently
No,
the B
no,
school.
no. So you see the
Oh,
interesting thing, and there are a number of people who have always objected, might be a bit strong, but protested um, or pointed out that FOSIL could only work in IB schools.
yeah,
But the interesting thing is that all of the progress, the real progress that we've made with FOSIL, has been in A level and GCSE and pre-GCSE contexts. So David, when he moved to AKS Lytham, and I think he may have mentioned that at some point in either their presentation or in the Q&A, that the the IB diploma or middle years program, and actually they were through school, so conceivably the primary years program, that just simply isn't an option for them.
no,
They aren't in the right area. I don't think it's the right demographic for that to be an option.
right,
So he and his team have a commitment to inquiry within a GCSE and A level system,
yeah,
which presents certain challenges but also opportunities. And I actually am quite amazed at the extraordinary progress that they've made and the quality of what they're doing, given that it is not an IB school and there's no intention,
and it's
certainly
become
for
one.
the foreseeable future, to become one.
Yeah. So let's go back. He has an understanding of fossil. And I remember when during his presentation that or afterwards he said something along the lines of in order to set it up, he had a conversation with you. He assumed that he needed to talk to somebody with expertise, hence you as a librarian, in order to be able to help set it up for him. Um, but that was based on a lot of knowledge and understanding that he had. The question, I suppose, comes with teachers using fossil and the inquiry process with or without the librarian.
I think it's probably better just to talk more broadly.
Yeah, okay.
But if you remember when we spoke about the history of school libraries, particularly in the UK,
Yeah,
so that educational reform movement in the 60s and into the 70s, and there my knowledge is better from America and Canada in terms of inquiry. Although we did talk about what was happening in the UK,
yeah,
that education reform movement, where inquiry emerged really as a viable approach to teaching and learning, provided that it was done properly.
yeah,
That actually came from teachers. So school librarians, for some reason, at that time, weren't really part of the discussion about inquiry as an approach to teaching and learning. I think what the case was is that librarians who were concerned about the library and the librarian's role in teaching and learning were wrestling with the library's place in research.
yeah. Okay.
So, if you think Barbara and Judy published their book on the research process, So teaching library skills as thinking skills.
Yeah.
So the library as a tool for learning. They published that in 1988. Then the librarian's real contribution to inquiry really only came at the beginning of the 2000s. So again, Barbara was one of the, I mean, I think, well, Barbara was one of the first to publish a specifically inquiry process, and that was in 2003. So by the time that librarians begin to make a real contribution to inquiry, and in fact, begin to address some of those shortcomings that Neil Postman identified,
Mm.
that rob inquiry of its potency. By the time librarians begin to make that contribution, teachers are no longer interested in inquiry in the same way. So when I was a teacher before I became a librarian,
Yeah.
my approach to my subject was inquiry, which I could have done without the involvement of a librarian and possibly a library if I was careful about how I used resources which would largely have to be online.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
However, as a teacher, I made substantial use of the library because inquiry is learning from information.
Yeah.
And some of the best information, depending on what you're studying, is available in books, some is available online. I didn't make use of the librarians because they weren't interested in that aspect of the library.
And we've got a lot of that at the
Yeah.
moment, haven't we? So let me get this straight. From what you've said, a teacher who is interested or is teaching through inquiry can do it without a librarian, but access to resources is essential. So therefore, the library is important.
Well, one other thing, just one other step before that, they'd have to have, so the first thing is they'd have to have an understanding of the inquiry process. Because I think that was one of the things that went wrong in the first embrace of inquiry is a lack of understanding of the process. And as a
Yeah,
consequence, a lot of that stuff was done very badly. So they'd
yeah,
have to have a deep understanding of the inquiry process, so a model,
yeah.
and they would need access to a rich variety of resources.
And the value of a librarian who understands and wants to work with inquiry is where they're sourcing resources that are useful and then able to teach skills alongside the teacher. Is that the connection? Mm.
So I would go one step further back, um, that the librarian, because in one of the articles that I wrote at some point, I still remember writing this, that the library by definition, so inquiry is a fundamental response to the world that we find ourselves in. So finding
Yeah,
out about the world and how it works. We record that. So scholars record their findings. Up until a certain point, um, that record of human knowledge was housed in the library. So anybody who wanted to find out about the world would either have to do it themselves or they could go to a library and they could learn from what somebody else had done from the record. Now, that makes the library so that the library, by definition, is um, integral to inquiry. And the librarian, to the extent that they are interested in human knowledge and the acquisition of human knowledge, rather than just books on the shelves, is integral to inquiry. Um, so the starting point, I think, is that the librarian has to see themselves as integral to that educational process. So that in a sense, that's why I become a librarian.
Yeah.
because I see myself and my library as integral to teaching and learning in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I need to understand the process, and then I need to understand both the library as a space, but also the library in terms of its physical and virtual resources. I need to understand that in relation to the inquiry learning process.
So we're having to where what we're saying is then is that school librarians need to be educated in the purpose of the school library within an educational setting. And then once we've done that, we're also saying that in understanding the inquiry process, there also needs to be a connect with the teacher who also understands the inquiry process. And although teachers can teach through inquiry without the librarian, there is a special enhancement when the two do it well together.
Mm. And that becomes clear, I think. So if you think um, about the role of the teacher, so the teacher is a subject specialist, and the subject that they are a specialist in is geography, English, history, maths, whatever. So they are a specialist in that content. It's unlikely that they are then also specialists in the inquiry process and the specific skills that the stages in the process need, which is the first subject specialism I think that the librarian needs, is that deep understanding of the inquiry process and the skills that are involved, and a real concern for what the subject teacher, the content of what the subject teacher is dealing with. So I need to be interested in what my English colleagues, my geography colleagues, my history colleagues, the substance of their subjects. Because, if you think about the nonfiction collection, and I think you probably could, to a certain extent, you could work some of the fiction into that as well.
Mm.
Surely that's what my nonfiction collection in the library is, a reflection of. Now, I need to be familiar with that. I can't just have some books on this Dewey range that
Yeah.
more or less cover that subject in an abstract or way or from a distance.
Mm.
So I'm interested in, and that I think is the where the real connection and the collaboration with teachers come from, is a sense that the librarian is interested in what I am teaching and how I am teaching it, which then opens the way to inquiry, and are able to resource it, help me resource it.
You
Because
see,
if the resources aren't there, children can't learn, the students can't learn from the information.
this is a huge ask, though, isn't it?
It's huge.
It sort of takes the librarian that one step away from, I might not know the answers to everything, but I can help you find it. In the fact that there has to be a foundational knowledge and understanding of the subjects that the teachers are teaching. That's huge.
Well, but now
In
if
in
you,
in every subject? Is that I don't know whether that's possible, Daryl.
so the two things that we can't lose sight of is that we're always only ever going to be in a more or less favorable, find ourselves in a more or less favorable situation. So, you can imagine in an ideal world having a team of librarians and library assistants in
Yes.
a suitably large, well-stocked, who are
Yes.
collaborating with teachers who are fully on board. And so that is an ideal. And we're only ever more or less going to be there. I
Yeah.
think the thing that we have lost is a a clear and compelling vision for that, and a determination to work towards that.
So what we're saying, I suppose, then, is realistically, there's potentially two teachers in most schools that would be prepared to link and connect with the librarian at this point. So the way to develop those relationships is for school librarians, A, to understand inquiry, and the process, understand that they are part of the educational process of the school. And then once they are talking to a teacher who is committed or wants to do more with inquiry, to learn more about their subject and demonstrate an interest in that person's subject, because that is the link, isn't it? That's the, you know, somebody wants to listen to me because I'm really excited about the topic that I'm talking about. If the librarian can immerse themselves within that thinking of the teacher and support that, that's where things begin to change. And I suppose in the long term, there's one librarian at this point. There's one librarian. So working well with one teacher and subject is potentially all that is available. But once that relationship is established, it's then an opportunity to leave them to their own devices until they need your support again and move on to the next subject or next teacher. Is that?
And yes, because you've absolutely nailed it on the head there. Because one of the really telling things for me is the shift in instructional emphasis from the first edition of the IFLA School Library Guidelines to the second. So, and I think that that reflects a much broader change in school librarianship in many countries, but not all,
Mm,
is a shift from information literacy to inquiry.
yeah,
Now, that is huge because if the instructional focus is on information literacy, um, I am teaching certain skills. So that's my expertise.
yeah,
So what I'm always trying to do is to convince teachers in what they are doing, which may not be inquiry and probably isn't.
yeah,
The focus of my interaction with teachers is finding somewhere to teach information literacy skills. Now, I'm not expecting the teacher to teach those information literacy skills, so I am always really in a position where I am needing to do that. However, if my focus is on the process of learning the content through inquiry and collaborating with the teacher to design an inquiry, that requires certain skills, including information literacy skills, and am supporting them to get that up and running, I really am aiming at a certain point to be able to step away from that
yeah.
and to
Okay.
work with another teacher or another subject.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So the maths inquiry at Blanchland is a very good example of Jenny doing a lot of work initially
yeah,
to really understand what it was that they were trying to do in year 7, 8, and 9 maths at the point where they had um, begun to explore the possibility of working an inquiry unit into the curriculum,
yeah,
required a lot of work to help them set it up and deliver,
yeah.
to the point now where I think, so after 3 years, so in the first instance, Jenny was basically in every maths lesson
Right.
um, for the inquiry, which was an awful lot of work
Yeah,
for us at that point in time, to now 3 years later, where a relatively brief planning meeting at the beginning to make any updates and adjustments and whatever, with being around in the background should it be necessary. That maths inquiry for year 7, 8, and 9 runs by itself through the maths department.
Does this also work if there's a change of staff? How does you know how, because I like there's a department which is great, so presumably it's set up within the
Yeah.
curriculum now, so therefore anybody that leaves or comes in will be aware of it. That is one of the problems, isn't it? Is that we've had that you'll make a relationship, with a colleague who is is in the history department, then they leave and you have to start all over again. Presumably, what you're talking about in your maths department is that it's embedded within the curriculum. That is
Yeah.
part of what is expected for any new teacher coming in.
Yes.
And are they expected to learn how to do it, or is that your role to go back in and support that teacher?
So, that then operates on a number of different levels because obviously that new teacher's colleagues in that department are knowledgeable and experienced in running the inquiry. But if you remember in the IFLA School Library Guidelines, the core instructional activities
Yeah,
include CPD for teachers.
right. Yeah, yeah,
So we have new staff induction every year, which is both induction into FOSIL-based inquiry as well as the library and the library's role and the librarian and library's role in that.
yeah,
And then it's entirely possible that we may work with that teacher further
yeah,
in relation to the inquiry that they need to do. So it may be that by this point, the maths department is so comfortable with what they're doing and confident in what they're doing that they are able to fully bring that new teacher on board.
right.
Or it may be that there are still some aspects of that where work with that individual teacher on our part would be beneficial in order to fully bring them up to speed and integrate them into that inquiry.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so it's a long-term thing. If you think we're going into our fifth year now at Blanchland.
yeah,
So some subjects, some year groups,
yeah,
the signature work year 1 and year 2, so that's basically the whole of almost the whole of infants. So it's
yeah,
just reception, which is a slightly different story. But a well-designed, well-supported signature work inquiry, at least one inquiry for years 1 and 2. I still help with the year 2 one, but that's because certainly at this stage I enjoy that and it helps me to keep thinking about how inquiry is unfolding at that phase of school. But certainly Jenny did quite a bit of work in the first year of the year 1 inquiry.
yeah,
But the year 1 teacher now runs that inquiry with very little, if any, active input from Jenny.
yeah,
So it's a combination. There will be opportunities where almost right from the beginning, it may be possible to work with an entire department, in which case you're training an entire department's worth of teachers. But it may be that in other departments, you're working with a single teacher with a view to establishing that more broadly in the department.
So let's round this off by going back to the question, do schools really need a library and librarian to use FOSIL? Can we sum it up in a few words, our thinking behind this?
So I would say, so strictly speaking, no,
Yeah,
because if a teacher or a school full of teachers wanted to teach through inquiry, they would need a deep understanding of the inquiry process, and they would need access to resources which, strictly speaking, you wouldn't need a librarian to provide, a library or a librarian to provide. However, that is, in my view, a less than ideal solution, because what that potentially misses out on, and now this depends on the librarian,
Yeah.
what that potentially misses out on is a expert on the inquiry process who is able to bring a level of knowledge and experience to collaboration with the teacher on that approach to teaching and learning, and who, out of that deep understanding of the role of resources and information in that learning process, both physical in the library and online, um, is able to resource and support learning from those resources, um, in a way that, because that again is a specialist contribution.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So what that means is that you have a specialist in this subject and a specialist in the process of learning that subject in a certain way,
Yeah.
using certain resources, collaborating,
Yeah.
um, on a powerful learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That
an opportunity and a challenge.
absolutely. And a great way to finish.
Hmm.
I think we're going to come back to this a lot, Darrell. I think, do you know, hopefully it helps others listening in, but it certainly helps me begin to process the challenges, but the opportunities that come along with this kind of thinking, and the resources and the tools that come with that are hugely beneficial. So thank you once again for giving me your time. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to our FOSIL podcast. As always, if you'd like to comment on anything you've heard, we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss out on future discussions. Thank you very much for listening.